welcome to the Step Into the Story Writer's Room. It's our first episode of this segment where we're going to pull the curtain back behind, and so give you a behind the scenes look of what it's like to be a writer, what some of the work that our minds go through, and also for writers to kind of get some tips and the benefit of our many, many years of experience, and hopefully it'll help you craft a better book.
Yeah, so if you're new to the broadcast, I'm Donna Allward, and this is Barbara Tanner Wallace. Between the two of us, we have somewhere around 100 books, Barb.
100 books.
And we've been at this for probably a combined 30, 40 years between the two of us.
Yep. We've sold maybe 3 or 4 million books worldwide.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And so, you know, we've got a little experience, and we're also best friends with a love of upmarket fiction, historical fiction in particular, which we chat about in our Step Into the Story community. But the writing room, or the writer's room, is a whole new experience for us, which is kind of exciting. And so readers can look into our crazy minds, and the writers that are in the community might find this a little interesting.
Yeah, I think they will.
Yeah, so in this first episode of the Writing Room, we're going to talk about motivation. And to me, I think that's the most important word with character development, because motivation is the why, and it's the why your characters do what they do, and it drives the choices that they make. And when your characters aren't properly motivated, then they're two-dimensional. They can feel flat. Their actions don't necessarily make sense. And it's part of a trio of character development concepts that we call GMC, which is goals, motivation, and conflict. And these are the things that when you develop your character, it's really what makes the reader care about who they are. Otherwise, they're just talking heads, or they're doing things, but you don't really relate to the character, or get really sucked in. So I'm going to throw it over to Barb to give a quick and dirty explanation of goals, motivation, and conflict.
Okay, so in every story you write, no matter what kind, whether it's sci-fi, a mystery, a historical fiction, or even upmarket fiction, whatever, you have your character. You're going to have the building blocks of goal, motivation, and conflict. Every character is going to have a goal. There's something that they're looking for, whether it's to find the killer, populate the planet, win the bake-off in the local bake-off town, in the town, whatever. They have a goal that they're trying to get to. And then they have the motivation, which is why they want the goal. And I'm going to skip over that just because we're going to spend the whole rest of the episode talking about it. And then you have the conflict, which is the thing that is keeping them from getting to their goal. Frequently, the conflict dovetails nicely with the motivation, because they seem to, a lot of times they are related. So those are the 3 blocks. We're going to today. I'm stuttering like crazy, and you'll have to apologize. It's been that kind of day, folks. Today we're going to give you some tips on how to make a stronger character motivation. I'm one of the people that believe that if you have the right motivation, your character can get away with anything.
Yep.
And one of my favorite examples is Scarlett O'Hara. Because if you remember, if those of you who've read Gone with the Wind, she does some pretty awful things, and yet you're still invested in Scarlett O'Hara all the way through all 700 pages or something of that book. And the reason is because very early on, you get her motivation, which is to save Tara, which is really about the one thing that she always loved, her father. And the one thing that he always loved was the land. And he said, the land is the one thing you always can count on. And so she's driven to save Tara. And because of that, you're willing slightly to excuse her when she steals her sister's husband and accuses a man of attacking her and all these other things, because her motivation. She's so focused on it that's what she's trying to do.
Yeah. And it's, when you look at GMC, it's like motivation is sort of the glue that holds the other two together, because it's the goal is what they want, and the conflict is, why they can't have it. But the why is all the reasons standing in their way. It's the reason why they want the goal, and it's the reason why they can't have it. So it sort of holds everything together. And it's the reason why readers root for the protagonist, and also why a villain can be terrifying or quite chilling, or because if you have and I know you're going to talk about villains in a bit, but they need to be as developed as any other character, or else they're just a device, right? And we don't want our characters to be devices. So this is the big key to keep that from happening. So if you stick with the glue metaphor, and I'm gonna work through my notes here a little bit, you need to choose the best glue for the project. So I know what you had said, Barb, was like you can choose between a glue stick and a glue gun, and then I was like, or Gorilla Glue or crazy glue. I mean, there's all kinds of glue, and it depends on the story how much you need, right? The stronger and more powerful the glue, and the more human the motivation, and the more that really digs deep, the more the story will resonate with readers, because the readers will start to see themselves in that character. Going from there, we're going to go into our top 5 tips for stronger character motivation.
Tip number 1, Donna just said, dig deep. It is very easy to come up with the surface motivation. You want to know, what does your character really want? Let's take our bake-off example for example. She wants to win the bake-off. Why? Because she wants to save the bakery. Okay, great. Why does she want to save the bakery? Because it belonged to her father, and she inherited it, and it would mean a lot to her to keep the bakery going. Why does it mean a lot to get have the bakery going? Because her father wanted her to become a baker, and she didn't. She became an actress instead, and now her father's gone, and she feels like she's disappointed him, and this is her chance to make up to him all the disappointment she was to him during his life. So do you see how you keep asking why over and over and over till you get to the true reason? It's not that she wants to save it because she owes her father. It's much deeper than that. It's her guilt over disappointing him, and it's part of her identity, things like that.
Yeah. So number 2 is dig into a universal need. And so I remember a long time ago, Barb, we were at, I think it was the New England conference, or maybe it was New Jersey. I don't remember which one. But you did a workshop on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, at the bottom are the things that everybody needs, like shelter and water and food and that kind of thing. But then, as you get further along, it becomes very interpersonal. So there are 4 things I'm going to tap into for universal needs. So the first one is belonging. And so we all want to feel like we're a part of something. So whether that is a community or a family or a sense of home, that sense of belonging really drives a lot of motivation. And honestly, I put that one first because that tends to be my core story, is finding a place to belong. And if you look in almost any of my books, you'll find that element in there in some way. The second is mastery. So it's a sense of achievement to build up confidence. And then we believe that we have what it takes to achieve our goals. So when you see something that is achievement driven, or the character has something that they want to prove to somebody else, that's a mastery. There's independence, and I love this one because it's the knowledge that you'll be okay on your own, right? And self-sufficient, that even if everything goes to hell, you're going to be okay. And I always think of that old Jerry Maguire quote where it's like, you complete me. And it's like, no, like people should be 2 complete, self-sufficient, autonomous beings, and then come together and make each other stronger. So I really like this this idea of independence and self-actualization. So, and then the last one is contribution, and that's the need to give back or to be generous, to serve others, or to make a difference in the world. So when you see characters that are driven by wanting to say, like, have some sort of a something that they're passionate about that they want to save the turtles, like, but they're very interested in contributing and giving back. So where does motivation come into all this? And I guess if you think of your character's universal need and what that is, and then you ask yourself why they feel that way, and you keep drilling down, you know, like, why do they long to master a skill or have achievement? Is it because, you know, are they a type A personality? Were they brought up in a home where they felt like they couldn't do anything right, or they were told they were stupid? Why do they long for a place to call home, or the independence to call the shots in their own lives? And like, all you have to do is start asking questions, and you start digging down in that, and the possibilities become quite endless. So, so that's actually, I think that's, I always find that really fun when you start digging down into a character like that.
The other reason you can tap into a universal need is there are things that we all want. We all want, like Donna said, we all want love. We all want to belong. We all want to feel like we've contributed. We all want respect. When you tap into one of those as the motivating factor, your readers will be much more invested because they feel the same way. And
right. They can recognize what that feels like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in our third one is to ground the motivation in backstory and characters' core beliefs. One of the common mistakes I read in a lot of beginning writing is that they have a character and there's a gap between the motivation and what this character is. Like, for example, they'll give them a perfectly nice motivation, but it doesn't fit the personality. One of the ones you read a lot, because I came from the romance world, was this CEO who is afraid to commit because his fiance broke his heart and left him at the altar. And okay, yes, people are afraid to commit, but you think about it, the guy's a CEO. He runs a company. He's a take no prisoners alpha kind of guy who is tough, sexy. Really gonna not commit because one girl broke his heart? It's like, no, he's not. He's going to get over it. I got my heart broken in life. Donna's had her heart broken in life. We moved on. Now, you take the same guy, and if it was his mother who abandoned him repeatedly, and they would come back and be full of promises of like, this time is different. I'm clean. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And then suddenly fall off the wagon. And now he's with the foster family again. And anyone who's familiar with the foster family system, you could slide around from family to family to family based on a variety of circumstances, not always because they're bad families. It's just circumstances move them around. So he's had no kind of stability where it lasts. Well, then, yeah, he is going to have a fear of commitment because he's not going to believe that anything good lasts.
So I gotta do a little sidebar here, because as you're saying it, and I know we talked about it like earlier today, as you're saying it, I'm thinking, but I did that in Scandal and the Runaway Bride. Like, the whole reason why he doesn't want to commit is because he had his heart broken by a girl, and he's nobility. He's running this big, like, multi-billion-dollar, you know, family empire, and I'm like, so why didn't, like, is it okay that I did that? Like, and then I realized that the whole thing was not that she necessarily broke his heart, but that what he thought was real was really her wanting his position and his money. And so that became the whole reason why he didn't want to commit to anybody, because he didn't trust that people weren't there for, like, looking for his money and his title. So then I thought, okay, so it can work. So if you just have to make sure you go deep enough.
Right. I said it's a perfectly good, good motivation. I just personally always found that if you ground it into something that's much more part of the character, you give the character a much richer background, and then you match the motivation to what's in their backstory. I read a book or had a friend who was writing a book where the motivation had nothing to do with the backstory. And I kept saying, well, why does he want to do this? Why does he want to do this? And she's like, because he does. And I don't want to spoil the book because it's coming out.
No, but that's not a good enough answer, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it can't be because the author wants it to happen. It has to be true to the character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and our fourth one, we're going to let Donna get the complicated one.
Well, sort of, but not really. Okay, so give characters external and internal motivation. So, and this is conscious or unconscious. So, using Barb's example above of the bake-off, the external motivation could be she wants to win the bake-off because the prize money will give them an infusion of cash to save the bakery, or it'll help restore the bakery's reputation. So that's sort of the external motivation. But then when you look at the internal motivation, it's very much more about I disappointed my dad, now he's gone and I feel guilty about that. And if I take over the bakery, then I'm going to feel like I've somehow redeemed myself in some way, and I won't feel so guilty. And, like too long didn't read, of course you will still feel guilty because that won't solve anything, and there's your conflict. So
I think it's important. I'm going to cut you off because as a sidebar, I think it's important to say that the external is what's happening on the page. The internal is what's happening in the character's head. Yeah. They are not always aware of their internal motivation.
No,
you don't want your character to be too self-aware. You need to know what their motivation is.
Right.
You need to know why, and you can drop little hints through it. But most of us don't know why we're doing something until we sit down and take a good long look at ourselves.
Yeah. And what's really neat is when you do that and the reader kind of has the idea that they know, but the character still hasn't clued in, and that creates a tension for the reader, which is kind of lovely. It's sort of like what the reader needs to know and what the character needs to know, which can sometimes be two different things. And then I was looking at my work in progress, which is a historical fiction. So like getting out of romance world for a bit, because we've spent a lot of time in romance world over the years. One of my main characters has to make a really big decision because she's lost pretty much her whole family. And without them, she doesn't really have a reason for living because she's all by herself. And so her universal need is belonging, and she'll do anything to find her missing family members. And the reason why is because she was orphaned as a teenager, and then her husband died in battle. And she's really terrified of being totally alone. Her external motivation is that, she needs to find a job and a place to live to support the family, like create a loving and stable home for the family she has left. But the internal motivation is very much that she's afraid of being left all alone. So, there's a bit of push and pull, and they should work together, I think. And then Barb has our number 5.
And this is one of my biggest bugaboos as a writer. Mm-hmm. Give your villains and your antagonists motivation too.
Yeah.
What makes a villain scary is when they have reasons for why they're doing it. And again, this is something you need to dig deep with. Your villain is not just a random psycho killer or a guy who wants to destroy and raise the building that the bakery is in. That's a stereotype. Avoid the stereotypes, give them motivation, why it's so important. You don't have to have it on the page necessarily, but you need to have them have stronger reasons than just because I need a bad guy.
Right.
I love to use the thriller example because that's one that's chronic. You have a guy who's killing people because he is just killing people. And yes, there are serial killers who are just crazy serial killers, but more often there is someone who's doing something because they believe they're right. The nurse who's euthanizing people, or the guy who's seeking revenge for a crime that happened against somebody he loved. I mean, one of the things that made Hitler so scary is Hitler believed he was doing a great thing, building this great German empire. Villains believe in what they're doing.
It's getting into the psyche, right?
Yeah, and the same thing with the antagonists. Don't just have someone come in doing random bad things. Give them a motivation for doing it. The guy wants to tear down the building. Why? Because he needs that building he needs that land in order to expand his business, which is suffering, and he needs to grow it. Or, you don't need to go super deep if it's just a small piece, but give them something. Make them 3D people.
And that all leads to when you do that, tension on every page, right? And that's something that Donald Moss always talked about was make sure you have tension on every page.
Yes.
And so when you give your characters, either protagonists or antagonists, a really rich background and motivations, then the tension it's there, to exploit, I guess. Because I like exploiting as a writer, but yeah, I think that I would never. The villains that scare the hell out of me are the ones that you really can get into their head, or the author lets you get into their head, and you're just like, because it all sounds so logical. That's scary as hell. So we do have a bonus tip, and this one is courtesy of Susan Meyer, and I pull it out all the time when I'm talking to other authors, and it's called the list of 20. And so when your character wants to do something, and you have to figure out why, because they can't just do it because they want to or because you want them to, you can start a list of 20 reasons. And so the first 4 or 5 will be very on the surface and should come to you very easily. And then you start really struggling for some more, and they might get quite silly. But the further down the list you go, and usually by the time you get to 15, like sometimes it doesn't even take the whole 20, all of a sudden there'll be a nugget of something that'll come out, and you'll be like, that's it. And because it requires you to dig really, really deep into their motivation. So I always suggest, pulling out a sheet of paper and doing a list of 20 and see how that makes your brain work and comes up with some solutions. So that's the bonus tip.
There you go. Great books to read on this would be Deb Dixon's Gold Motivation and Conflict. It's available only on Kindle right now, but it is a classic. And if you have not read it, you should. Donna Moss's The Fire Within, which is great. He goes into great detail about why your antagonists and villains need backstories.
Yeah, any of his really, because he does sort of revisit a lot of concepts in each of his books. So I think you'll find that in probably any of his books. So and then you had K.M. Weiland for creating character arcs.
Yes, I love that book.
And she has a great website as well with so many tips on it. So I would check that out. And then I believe you actually put me onto the Writing for Emotional Impact by Carl Iglesias. You might even have gifted me that book. And Creating Characters by Dwight Swain.
There we go.
That was my other addition to the list.
So thank you for joining us on this inaugural show. Bear with us. This is a work in progress. We are still learning our way on how to do this as most entertaining way possible. But if you liked what you saw and want to give us a second chance, please subscribe to our channel.
Yep.
Or visit our Facebook community at facebook.com/group/stepintothestory. I'm Barbara Wallace. This is my friend Howard. And we will see you next time. Thank you.